Recording in 3, 2, and 1.
David Lopan? David Lopan, the little old Chinese guy, or David Lopan, the 6-foot fucking roadblock?
I don't even know what the fuck we're talking about here. Welcome to episode 114 of Nerdery Murdery.
Big 114, this is Zig with your nerdery.
And this is Jeffrey with your murdery. Welcome to another week of highs and lows, the ups and the downs, the good and the bad. Zig, what's going on in your world?
I'm not a lot, working, getting some stuff done, getting ready for the Halloween time, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
A lot of fun, like that. Creep picked up a couple of disembodied feet and hands. We get those placed around the yard, so that's fun.
Oh, fun. Well, early to have out Halloween decorations or whatever. I've seen Christmas decorations already up at Sam's.
Why?
I don't know. They got both Halloween and Christmas decorations up already. I don't know. Crazy. Absolutely crazy. In my end, I'm going back through all the seasons of Oz again.
Nice. Oz.
Yes, very, very tough show to watch if you've never watched it. About a maximum security prison. Very, very rough show.
Yes. Not nice.
No, not nice at all. Lots of murderies and rapey happen in that.
Rapies, murderies.
Yes. So I'm almost finished with it. I'm just about to start season 6, I think, if I remember right. Just about to kick off to that. So
they ran what, 7 seasons? Is that right?
No, I think it was 6.
Okay.
I think it was 6 total. So about done with that. Then need to find something else to watch. I've up to date on Ahsoka, and I've watched Justified City Primeval, and
see, I haven't seen that one yet. Is it good?
It's good. It's really good. You should give it a watch. They set it up that I think they're going to have another season.
Nice.
So really excited about that. American Horror Story has dropped another season, which has been pretty good so far.
Nice.
So getting on that. So anyway, with that, we'll let you step over to the nerdery side of the house, which I have no clue what we're doing.
Actually, we're going to talk about 3 adventure films that are eerily similar.
All right.
The adventure films are The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the 8th Dimension.
All right.
Big Trouble in Little China. And The Golden Child.
All
right. David Lopan is the bad guy in Big Trouble in Little China.
Got it.
So we'll start with Buckaroo Banzai, since it actually came out first.
Mm-hmm.
Often shortened to Buckaroo Banzai, the actual title is The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the 8th Dimension. It's a 1984 American science fiction film, science fiction / fantasy.
Yeah.
Produced and directed by W.D. Richter and written by Earl Mac Rauch. It stars Peter Weller in the title role with Ellen Barkin, John Lithgow, Jeff Goldblum, and Christopher Lloyd, as well as Lewis Smith, Rosalind Cash, Clancy Brown, Pepe Serna, Robert Ito, Vincent Schiavelli, Dan Hedaya, Jonathan Banks, John Ashton, Carl Lumley, and Ronald Lacey. And they forgot Billy Vera. Billy Vera of Billy Vera and the Beaters is also in it. The film centers upon the efforts of a polymath, Dr. Buckaroo Banzai, a physicist, neurosurgeon, test pilot, and rock star, as well as a comic book hero, because he has his own comic book, to save the world by defeating a band of interdimensional aliens called Red Lectroids from the planet 10. The film is a cross between an action-adventure and science fiction film genres, and also includes elements of comedy and romance. After the screenwriter W.D. Richter hired novelist Earl M. Raunch to develop a screenplay of a new character that Raunch had developed called Buckaroo Banzai, Richter teamed with producer Neil Canton to pitch the script to MGM/UA studio chief Dave Bingelman, who took it to 20th Century Fox to make the film. Box office figures were low and less than half of the film's production costs were recovered. Some critics were put off by the complicated plot, although Pauline Kael enjoyed the film and Vincent Canby called it pure nutty fun. Buckaroo Banzai has been adapted for books, comics, and video games, and has attached a loyal cult following. I saw this bad boy in the theater. I thought it was great.
I saw it for the first time on Laserdisc.
Nice. I bet that bad boy looks good on Laserdisc. I may have this on Laserdisc, come to think of it. Um, Buckaroo Banzai and his mentor, Dr. Tohichi Hikachiya, perfect the oscillation overthruster, a device that allows an object to pass through solid matter. Banzai tests it by driving his jet car through a mountain. While in transit, he finds himself in another dimension. After exiting the mountain and returns to his normal dimension, he discovers an alien organism has attached itself to his car.
There was another movie that went on this premise, Time Rider.
Time Rider, The Legend of Lyle Swan.
Yes.
Yes.
Except he went back in time versus another
Yes.
dimension.
Yes, he went back in time and became his own great grandfather.
Yes.
So weird. Dr. Emilio Lizardo, incarcerated at the Trenton Home for the Criminally Insane, sees a television news story of Banzai's successful test in 1938. Dr. Lazaro and Hakita had built a prototype overthruster, but he tested it before it was ready and became stuck between dimensions. He was attacked by aliens until freed by his colleagues. Emerging changed and violent, understanding that Banzai has finally accessed the eighth dimension, Lizardo escaped the asylum and plots to steal the overthruster. In truth, Lizardo had been taken over by a red Lectroid. So the regular Lectroids had banished the red Lectroids out of their off their home because they were basically space Nazis. So Banzai and his band, the Hong Kong Cavaliers, are performing at a nightclub when Banzai interrupts their musical intro to address a depressed woman in the audience, Penny Pretty. During a song he performs especially for her, she attempts suicide, which is mistaken as an assassination attempt on Banzai. After questioning her at the jail, he realizes she is his late wife Peggy's long-lost identical twin sister and bails her out. He then goes on to to perform brain surgery with a doctor who he asked to join him on tour. But when they show up to pick up the doctor, Jeff Goldblum, he's dressed as a cowboy. And then they get involved in this attempt by the red Lectroids who are on Earth, who are all named John, to take back Planet 10 and then take over the Earth. It's a very, very complicated plot. In 1974, W.D. Richter's wife read a review of Dirty Pictures from the Prom, the debut novel from Dartmouth College graduate and writer Earl McRausch, and recommended it to her husband. Richter, also an alum for Dartmouth College, read the book, loved it, and wrote McRausch a letter. The two men began corresponding. When the writer told him about his interest in becoming a screenwriter, Richter offered him an open-ended invitation to visit him in L.A., where he was attending University of Southern California and working as a script analyst for Warner Brothers. Years passed and Richter became a successful screenwriter. McRausch took Richter up on his offer and arrived in L.A. Richter proceeded to introduce the writer and producer-director Irwin Winkler, who gave McRausch rent money for the next 6 months. And over several dinners, McRausch told Richter and his wife of a character named Buckaroo Banzai about whom he was thinking of writing a screenplay. Richter and his wife liked the idea and paid McRausch $1,500 to develop and write it. And according to McRausch, his script was inspired by all those out-and-out, press the accelerator to the floor, nonstop kung fu movies of the early 70s. McRausch's original 30-page treatment was titled Find the Jet Car. Everybody thought it was kind of weird. An early draft titled The Strange Case of Mr. Cigars was a huge robot in a box of Adolf Hitler's cigars, which Hitler didn't smoke. So anyway, he shelved his work for a few years where he wrote for the New York Times and Martin Scorsese and other produced screenplays. In 1980, Richter talked with producer Frank Marshall and Neil Canton about filming one of his screenplays. And out of this meeting, Canton and Richter formed their own production company and decided that Buckaroo Banzai would be their first film. So they go on to produce Buckaroo Banzai, and it doesn't do really well. And they got a lot of good people. I mean, the cast is great. Costume designer Augie Gerard Rogers, who designed costumes for Return of the Jedi, American Graffiti, and The Conversation, uh, as well as working on Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the newer one with Donald Sutherland
Hmm.
and um, Leonard Nimoy. Um, Rogers gathered Gianni Versace, Perry Ellis, and Giorgio Armani sports jackets, suits, and ties for the Hong Kong Rangers. So that's why they always look so cool. It was cutting edge stuff. And one of the auditions uh, for the thing, they went to Nudie Cohen, who makes the nudie suits,
Hmm.
and they were like, "Why don't you give us a Buckaroo Banzai outfit?" So he designed one, but it was more of a cowboy thing because he figured the guy's name is Buckaroo, and that's what they put Jeff Goldblum in. It was actually what they call a nudie suit. Um, Richter had compiled a 300-page book called The Essential Buckaroo, which consisted of notes and every incomplete script McRaunch wrote over the years, and that's what they basically used as a film guide. It was going to be like an adventure serial. They were going to make a whole bunch of these Buckaroo Banzai novels. This was
Right.
just for movies. This is just going to be the first one. Um, and Fox hired Tony Erdman and a team of publicists, including Blake Mitchell and Jim Ferguson, to promote the film at Star Trek conventions, and it was real big. They studio publicist Rosemary La Salamandria, sorry, said that nobody really knew what Buckaroo Banzai was. But John Lithgow said, um, I'm not really sure anybody knew, but he tried to explain the story. Okay, I'm going to quote Lithgow. I've tried to explain the storyline to people, and it takes about an hour. I mean it. It's that complicated, but it's terrific. Every time I tell people about it, I get so excited that I end it by saying, Buckaroo Banzai, remember where you heard it first. So Lithgow was actually really playing this up because he really loved the show. It was originally scheduled to be released on June 8th, 1984, but was pushed back to August 10th, and it opened on 236 screens and faced stiff competition against the likes of Star Trek III: The Search for Spock, which also had Christopher Lloyd in it, and Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, and Ghostbusters. So yeah, they all came out that same weekend.
Rough competition there.
Oh my God, yes. And Buckaroo Banzai is the story's kind of convoluted. I think that movie probably could have been another hour, hour and a half, and it probably would have been, at least a 2-hour movie. It probably would have been a little more easy to take, but or more comprehensible. I still love it. I love it from the beginning to the end. I've seen it probably 50 times.
Hmm.
Um, the end where they're all walking around the culverts in the L.A. River together.
I can hear the song in my head.
Da, 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 da. Yeah, I've included that in our YouTube uh, playlist. Just that scene, so you can hear the song. Also, the scene where he's supposed to wax poetic, and he gets on the microphone and goes, "Remember, no matter wherever you go, there you are." Anyway, it's this great, crazy adventure film. But what's weird is it's sort of science fiction-y and sort of adventure-y and sort of camp. But they'd been making this all around town. Well, there was another production that wanted to do kind of the similar things. The problem is when they started the production, there was some argument on who should be in it and what it should be about. Originally, John Carpenter was attached to it, but he got tired of what the studio was telling him, so he started his own production, which is why you get Big Trouble in Little China and The Golden Child. Those two movies started out as the same production originally.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, John Carpenter's Big Trouble in Little China is an 86 American fantasy action comedy film directed by John Carpenter. It stars Kurt Russell, Kim Cattrall, Dennis Dunn, and James Hong. The film tells the story of a truck driver, Jack Burton, who helps his friend Wang Chi rescue Wang's green-eyed fiancee from bandits in the San Francisco's Chinatown. They go into the mysterious underground beneath Chinatown, where they face an ancient sorcerer named David Lopan, who requires a woman with green eyes to marry him in order to be released from his centuries-old curse. And although the original screenplay by first-time screenwriter Gary Goldman and David Z. Weinstein was envisioned as a Western set in the 1880s, screenwriter W.D. Richter, remember that name?
Mm-hmm.
Was hired to rewrite the script extensively and modernize it. The studio hired Carpenter to direct the film and rushed Big Trouble in Little China into production so that it would be released before a similarly themed Eddie Murphy film, The Golden Child, which was slated to come out around the same time. The project fulfilled Carpenter's long-standing desire to make a martial arts film. The film was a commercial failure, grossing $11.1 million in America, below its estimated $19 to $25 million budget. But it received generally positive reviews despite leaving Carpenter disillusioned with Hollywood and influenced his decision to return to independent filmmaking. It gained a steady audience on home video and became a cult classic. So how it breaks down is truck driver Jack Burton wins a bet with his friend Wang Chi. To make sure he follows through on payment, Jack accompanies him to the airport to pick up Wang's Chinese fiancée, Miao Yin, where a Chinese-American street gang, the Lords of Death, tries to kidnap another Chinese girl. She's being met by her friends Gracie Law. After Jack intervenes, they take Miao Yin instead. Jack and Wang track the Lords of Death to Chinatown, where they find a funeral procession that erupts into a battle between the Chang Sing and the Wing Kong, two ancient Chinese warrior societies. When the three storms, thunder, rain, and lightning, warriors with weather-themed powers appear, slaughter the Chang Sing. Jack attempts to gun his big rig through the crowd, but runs over David Lopan, a man directing the three storms. Horrified, Jack exits his truck but finds Lopan unhurt and glowing with magic. Wang hurriedly guides Jack through the alleys and they escape, but Jack's truck is stolen. This is basically where the show starts. It just gets weirder and weirder and weirder. The first version of the screenplay was written by first-time screenwriter Gary Goldman and David Weinstein. Goldman had been inspired by a new wave of martial arts films that had all sorts of weird action and special effects shot against the background of ancient Chinese mysticism and modern sensibilities. They had written a Western originally set in the 1880s with Jack Burton as a cowboy who rides into town. Goldman and Weinstein envisioned what amounted to a weird Western in this case, combining Chinese fantasy elements with an Old West setting. They submitted a script to Taft Entertainment Pictures executive producer Paul Monash and Keith Barish during the summer of 1982. Monash bought their script and had them do at least one rewrite, but still did not like the results. He remembers the problem came largely from the fact it was set in turn-of-the-century San Francisco, which affected everything, style, dialogue, and action. Goldman rejected a request by 20th Century Fox for a rewrite that asked for major alterations. He was angered when the studio wanted to update to a contemporary setting. The studio then removed the writers from the project. However, they still wanted credit for their contributions. The studio brought in, at this point, W.D. Richter, who had basically delved into this sort of thing. But he used Rosemary's Baby as a template, presenting the foreground story in a familiar context, rather than the San Francisco of the turn of the century, which distanced the audience immediately. But then underground, you have a much better chance of making direct contact with the audience. So it basically, you've got San Francisco of modern day, but when you get into this world, you basically cross a threshold, like going underground, where everything gets weird and strange. There was a Writers Guild of America determined the written by credit would go to Goldman and Weinstein and not to Richter himself, even though he basically rewrote. Hong Kong Wuxia films, particularly Sue Hark's Zoo Warriors from the Magic Mountain, also served as an influence. It was noted as a box office bomb. The film was released in the midst of the hype of James Cameron's blockbuster Aliens, which was released 16 days after. But on the DVD commentary of Big Trouble in Little China, Carpenter and Russell discussed that among possible reasons for the film's disappointing box office gross, they couldn't figure out why more people didn't want to see it, because that movie's a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, some of the same producers had also had a script that had Eddie Murphy attached to it called The Golden Child. The reason these three movies are similar is the same people worked on all three of them. Um, The Golden Child is a 1986 American dark fantasy martial arts action comedy film directed by Michael Ritchie. The film stars Eddie Murphy as Chandler Gerald, a Los Angeles social worker who is informed that he is the chosen one and is destined to save the Golden Child, a kidnapped Tibetan boy with mystical powers who is said to be the savior of all humankind. Alongside Murphy, the film's cast included Charlotte Lewis and Charles Dance. Um, yes, the boy child in the Golden Child is actually a girl.
Yeah.
That's the only movie she ever made. She didn't do anything else after that, but from what I understand, she got a pretty decent paycheck, even though the movie didn't do too well.
It made money.
Yeah, it made money, but it didn't do as well as they thought it was going to.
No.
It had Eddie Murphy in it, so
Yeah, they were trying to capitalize on the success of Beverly Hills Cop.
Yep. It did make $79,817 and $937 at the box office, which was way better. Or I'm sorry, $79,817,937. Which is way better than the other two films we talked about. They just didn't do as well. Basically, there's this remote temple where they capture this young boy with mystical powers, and they take him into Los Angeles. Well, one of the people who was there to protect him, they sent her to find the kid, and when she gets there, she realizes she needs help. So she tracks down the social worker whose job it is basically to track down missing children. That's what Tyler Gerald does. We basically make Eddie Murphy an action star who wisecracks,
Right.
which is basically what you wanted. But it seems like when they edited this film, that's the thing I don't like about it. They made him more wisecracky and less action oriented. I don't think that was the idea when they filmed it. I think it goes down to the editing. But the bad guy's Charles Dance, who was a disciple in this temple many years ago, and has decided that he wants to capture the power of this golden child, so he can, I think, live forever and be all powerful and all sorts of other things.
Well, and he's under the orders of some demon creature.
Yes, there is a demon creature there. So hilarity ensues.
It's actually the voice from the bad guy in Inspector Gadget.
Yes, Dr. Claw.
Yeah.
Dennis Feldman, a professional photographer whose only writing credit was just one of the guys, wrote a script called The Rose of Tibet, which he planned as a Raymond Chandler movie with supernatural elements. It attracted Hollywood attention, and after a bidding war, Paramount Pictures purchased the script for $330,000. Feldman had intended it to be a detective story rather than a comedy, and thought like a Mel Gibson for the lead role. John Carpenter was offered a chance to direct the film, but he preferred instead to work on Big Trouble in Little China with Kurt Russell. So Carpenter got a lot of the ideas ahead of time. Back in like 84, 85. It was released in December of 1986, and The Golden Child was a box office success. It earned quite a bit of money, as we said. In the United States alone, making it the 8th biggest film of the year. My pictures make their money back, Murphy remarked in 1989. No matter how I feel, for instance, about The Golden Child, which was a piece of shit, that movie made more than $100 million. So who am I to say it sucks? After The Golden Child, Murphy would participate in the writing of many of his films. Despite its commercial success, the film did not meet Paramount's expectations when compared to Murphy's previous film, Beverly Hills Cop, in 1984, which garnered like $234 million in change.
Right.
But The Golden Child didn't do poorly. I mean, like you said, it made money. It did way better than Big Trouble in Little China and Buckaroo Banzai. But some of the elements in The Golden Child are amazing. The The snake woman
Mm-hmm.
who just is constantly smoking, and he finally opens the curtain and she's a giant naga, is amazing. And then the character, the old Tibetan monk who is also Egg in Big Trouble in Little China. Apparently, that dude was working on both sets at the same time. Um, just basically yells at Tyler Durden and hurls insults at him.
Gerald.
Tyler Gerald.
Tyler Durden's
Tyler,
Fight Club.
yes, Tyler Durden is Fight Club, which we will talk about at some point. This movie is amazing. Again, out of the three, The Golden Child is my least favorite.
Oh, it's my most favorite out of the three.
Yeah, I do like all three of them though. When I say the least favorite, I mean it's like I love this one. I really love this one. This one I like quite a bit. So, I thought Eddie Murphy was fine. I think he probably could have been a little more actiony than wisecracky, but I don't think that was on Eddie Murphy. I think that was. I don't even think it was on the director. I think it was on the editor. I think the editor kind of screwed this up. You know what I mean? They was like, oh, we need to make this more jokey. No, you don't have to. If you ever saw 48 Hours, Eddie Murphy is great as an action guy who talks shit the whole time.
Right.
But he holds his own with Nick Nolte. And Nick Nolte and Eddie Murphy really did hit each other. A lot of people do not know that. Eddie Murphy and Nick Nolte decided they were going to go toe to toe, and they just deal with the consequences later. Which is amazing. They did not do that in another 48 Hours, but yeah. Eddie Murphy can hold his own, you know? He's a tough kid from a tough neighborhood. But yeah, that's about it for three eerily similar films. Get out and watch them. They are all readily available in lots of locations. You sit down and watch them right now. Again, I love Buckaroo Banzai better than Big Trouble in Little China. I love Big Trouble in Little China better than The Golden Child. I think, Jeffrey, you're in reverse on that. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, Golden Child, Big Trouble in Little China, Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai.
Yep.
But you liked all three, right?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, and I think if you're in the mood for a goofy kind of actiony adventure, almost kung fu movie but not quite, these three movies they fit the bill.
Well, I know at least within the last couple years, Golden Child was readily available for free on Amazon Prime. So
yes, I just watched it when I was writing the notes up. I watched all three of these again, and I could get them all, but that was a couple of months ago. So
yeah, awesome. Well, I appreciate the journey with that as always.
Thanks, sir.
With that, we'll step over to the murder side of the house.
Murder.
For today, I got my information off Mental Floss, Wikipedia, and Allocation, and this is the story of the Red Barn murder.
The Red Barn murder.
Yes. So Ann Martin was tired of the awful dream. Twice now she'd woken from terrible visions of her stepdaughter Maria, dead and buried under the dusty floor of a barn a half mile from the cottage Anne shared with her husband Thomas in Polstead, England.
Oh, wow.
At first, Anne believed it was just a bad nightmare. To interpret it otherwise was irrational claptrap, but when the dream returned, she started to have second thoughts. One day she approached Thomas and asked him to bring her some peace of mind. She said, quote, I think were I in your place, I would go examine the Red Barn. Bewildered, Thomas asked why. And she said, I have very frequently dreamed about Maria, and twice before Christmas. I dreamed that Maria was murdered and buried in the Red Barn. She said she would have told him sooner, Anne explained, but was afraid that she'd think that he would think she was superstitious.
Uh-huh.
The Red Barn itself was a prominent landmark in Polstead, a quaint corner of England's Suffolk County countryside. Named for a unique red brick roof, the building on Barnfield Hill was the last known meeting place between Maria Martin and her lover, William Corder. The pair had used the barn as a rendezvous point before apparently eloping to Ipswich on May 18th, 1827, and Maria's family hadn't heard from her in the 11 months since. The Martins often wrote letters to the couple, but Maria never responded. Whenever Corder returned to Polstead, he always offered a slew of excuses explaining why Maria wasn't writing. She was busy, her mail must have gotten lost, she had injured her hand, and she couldn't write back. He reassured them, however, that Maria was happy and basically fine. But when his wife became having bad dreams, Thomas Martin decided to dutifully check the red barn for any indication of foul play. He puttered around the structure and carefully removed litter from the floor and then noticed an unusual slump in the dirt. According to one account, Thomas, who was a mole catcher by trade, began loosening the ground with a mole catching spike, and upon lifting the tool, dredged up a chunk of rotting human flesh. Thomas didn't have to dig for more than 2 feet to discover that his wife's prophecy might be true. In a shallow hole lay a decomposed human skeleton wrapped in a sack. Yeah.
Hey, we're getting feedback.
So he didn't have to dig more than 2 feet to discover his wife's prophecy might be true. In a shallow hole, like I said, was the decomposed human skull wrapped in a sack. It had long hair and a green handkerchief around its neck. And upon seeing the body, Thomas refused to dig any further. He started for home. When he found his wife, Thomas asked if she recalled Maria wearing a handkerchief the day she ran off to elope, and if so, what color it was. And Anne searched her memories and nodded. Maria had been wearing a bandana that William Corder had given her, a green one, she said. William Corder was kind of a troublemaker. The son of a wealthy farmer, the sly ladies' man who went by the nickname Foxy, was known to forge checks and steal animals from neighboring farms. On one occasion, he kidnapped his father's pigs and pocketed the money from the sale. Although his father had settled the matter without involving the law, Corder had not changed his behavior. He later obtained money by passing a forged check for 93 pounds, which had helped local thief Samuel Beauty Smith steal a pig from a neighboring village. When Smith was questioned by a local constable over the theft, he made a prophetic statement concerning Corder, quote, "I'll be damned if he will not be hung some of these days." Corder had been sent to London in disgrace after his fraudulent sale of the pigs, but he was recalled to Polstead when his brother Thomas drowned attempting to cross a frozen pond. By some accounts, that was not the life the young man aspired to. Corder purportedly wanted to become a teacher or a journalist, but when his father refused to financially support those endeavors, Corder instead sustained his bank account with the fruits of petty crime. Whatever Corder's motivations, none of that mattered to his paramour, Maria Martin, a 24-year-old single mother. Maria Martin was born on the 24th of July in 1801. Maria is said to have been a good-looking young woman who attracted the attention of local lads. Her first child, whose father was Corder's older brother, had died early, but her second child, born to a member of the gentry who had no interest in marrying the daughter of a lowly mole catcher, was still alive. This second father regularly sent money to help the child, but was otherwise absent from Maria's life. So when William Corder returned to Polstead to help his family's farm in 1825, Maria quickly fell for the wily smooth talker. After all, Corder showed that he could handle some responsibility. The same year that he came back to town, his father died and 2 of his brothers became permanently hobbled by tuberculosis, leaving young Corder as one of the last able-bodied men in the family capable of running the farm. Around the time he assumed these duties, a romance between him and Maria began to blossom. At first, the couple tried to keep their relationship secret, but life had other plans. In 1826, Maria became pregnant for a 3rd time. Corder proposed that they marry shortly after the infant was born, but tragically, only 2 weeks after its birth, the baby died in Maria's arms. Maria's father and stepmother carefully placed the lifeless infant in a box and wrapped it in a napkin, and Corder promised to bury it somewhere safe. Corder also promised that he still wanted to marry Maria, child or not. There was one just stipulation. He said it had to happen soon. According to Corder, rumors were floating that the constable was going to punish Maria for having a 3rd child out of wedlock. Called bastardy, the crime was punishable by public whipping. So in other words, they had to elope. Corder initially suggested that they elope on the Wednesday evening, but later decided to delay until Thursday evening. But on Thursday, he was again delayed. His brother falling ill is mentioned as the reason in some sources, although most claim that all his brothers were dead by this time. Around noon on May 18th, 1827, Corder ran to the Martin College and told Maria it was time to go. The constable, he said, was prepared to arrest her at any moment, and Maria began to sob. Meanwhile, Maria's sister Anne noticed that the young man was carrying a gun, and she recalled, "He told me not to meddle with it as it was loaded." To avoid capture, Corder told Maria to dress in disguise and handed her a men's waistcoat, a hat, and a pair of trousers and a green bandana.
1826.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, with a flintlock. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, you'd load those up so you didn't have to load them later on.
He placed the rest of her clothes in a bag and told her to meet him at the Red Barn down the road where she could get dressed in her own clothing. Afterwards, they'd free to Ipswich and get married. Corder then slipped out the front door and Maria in male costume left out the back, but she was never seen again. Corder also disappeared, but later turned up and claimed that Martin was in Ipswich or some other place nearby, and he could not yet bring her back as his wife for fear of provoking the anger of his friends and relatives. The pressure on Corder to produce his wife eventually forced him to leave the area, and he wrote letters to Martin's family claiming that they were married and living on the Isle of Wight, and he gave various excuses for a lack of communication, like she was unwell, she had hurt her hand, or the letter must have been lost. Suspicion began to grow, and Martin's stepmother began talking of dreams that Maria had been murdered and buried in the Red Barn. On April 19th, 1828, she persuaded her husband to go to the Red Barn and dig in one of the grain storage bins. And as I said earlier, he quickly uncovered the remains of his daughter buried in a sack. She was badly decomposed, but still identifiable. An inquest was carried out at the Cock Inn on Polstead, which still stands today, where Martin was formally identified by her sister Anne from some physical characteristics.
Cock in.
Uh-huh.
Sorry.
That's all right. Her hair and some clothing were recognizable, and she was known to be missing a tooth, which was also absent from the jawbone of the corpse. Evidence was uncovered to implicate Corder in the crime. His green handkerchief was discovered around the body's neck. 11 months after she left, the police found William Corder married to a different woman and running a boarding school for girls in West London. Corder was easily discovered as Ayers, the constable in Polstead, was able to obtain his old address from a friend. Ayers was assisted by James Lee, an officer of the London police, who later led the investigation into, quote, Spring-Heeled Jack. They tracked Corder to Everley Grove House, which was a boarding house for ladies in Brentford. He was running the boarding house with his new wife, Mary Moore, whom he had met through a Lonely Hearts advertisement that he had placed in the Times, which would receive more than 100 replies. Judith Flanders states in her 2011 book that Corder had also placed advertisements in the Morning Herald and the Sunday Times. He received more than 40 replies from the Morning Herald and 53 from the Sunday Times that were never picked up, and these letters were subsequently published by George Foster in 1828. When the police accosted him, they asked if he had ever known a woman by the name of Maria Martin, and he responded, "I never knew of such a person even by name." A search of the house uncovered a pair of pistols supposedly bought on the day of the murder, some letters from a Mr. Gardner, which may have contained warnings about the discovery of the crime, and a passport from the French ambassador, evidence which suggests the Corder may have been preparing to flee. Immediately, the crime captured people's attention and imaginations. Here was the story of a poor country girl, a single mother no less, who was seduced and fooled by a wealthy cad who had lured to her death with the promise of marriage. No less amazing was the fact that the poor woman's body was purportedly discovered thanks to a dream. For newspapers, the story was pure catnip. M. Wyatt, a magistrate, explained at the time, "I never knew or heard of a case in my life which abounded with so many extraordinary incidents as the present. It really appears more like a romance than a tale of common life." Martin's exact cause of death could not be established. It was thought a sharp instrument had been plunged into her eye socket, possibly Corder's short sword, but this wound could also have been caused by her father's spade when he was exhuming the body. Strangulation. Right.
Hook. Yeah.
Yep.
That makes sense.
Strangulation could also not be ruled out, as Corder's handkerchief had been discovered around her neck, and to add to the confusion, the wounds to her body suggested she had been shot. The indictment charged Corder with murdering Maria Martin by feloniously and willfully shooting her with a pistol to the body and likewise stabbing her with a dagger. To avoid any chance of mistrial, he was indicted on 9 charges, including one of forgery. Within days of the body's discovery, Polstead became a bustling place, literally crowded with strangers from all parts of the adjacent country, for the news of this appalling discovery had reached the remotest parts of the kingdom. The lax laws of the time allowed newspapers to convict him before a single word of testimony was heard. He was denounced as a vicious killer from pulpits and in puppet shows. Through song, he was pronounced guilty as sin. Judge Alexander, who presided over the trial, was not happy with the media's conviction of the accused. He said the coverage was to the manifest detriment of the prisoner at the bar. In fact, as Corder sat in jail, Polstead would hold its most well-attended summer fair in ages, with amusements that included roving ballad singers and theatrical productions, all telling sensationalized versions of the Red Barn murder story. By the start of Corder's trial in early August, the whole country was familiar with the twisted story. Thousands of people flocked to Polstead to witness the proceedings, and nearly all the inns and public houses in the country ran out of rooms. The day before the trial, many visitors had no beds to sleep in at all. Demand to watch the proceedings was high enough that tickets were required.
Wow.
The crowd outside the jailhouse numbered in the thousands, and the scene was so jammed that the ticket taker, even members of the court, had trouble reaching the front door. When the sheriff's carriage arrived, it couldn't squeeze through the crowd. The Lord Chief Baron had to be carried off his legs on his way from the carriage to the bench. It was mayhem. Counselors, magistrates, jurors were all wedged together, and two of the former gentlemen had their forensics wigs hooked off, and one actually ungowned. Some lost their hats, some pocketbooks, and others their money, and not a few the lappets of their coats. Once everybody who could fit into the courthouse was settled, the counts against William Corder, all 10 of them, which included shooting, stabbing, and strangulation, were read. A model of the Red Barn was placed on the table in the courtroom, and the counsel for the Crown began to make its case against the young farmer, and the evidence certainly seemed damning. Maria's stepmother was in the room when Corder and Maria had made plans to meet at the Red Barn. At the coroner's inquest held shortly after the body was discovered, the constable denied ever telling Corder he had a warrant out for Maria's arrest. Corder had waffled constantly whenever asked about Maria's whereabouts, and again, in Corder's London residence, police had found the French passport, which was a suspicious indication that he'd been planning to flee the country. In a trembling voice, Corder defended his name and blamed the press for slandering his reputation and sealing his fate. Reading from a written statement, he declared, quote, "By that powerful engine, the press, which regulates the opinion of so many persons in this country, and which is too often, I fear, though unintentionally, the slanderer and destroyer of innocence, I have had the misfortune to be depicted in the most humiliating and revolting characters. I have been described by that press as the most depraved of human monsters." Corder went on to claim that he had indeed argued with Maria in the Red Barn, but he did not kill her. Rather, she had shot and killed herself. The young man claimed that he had panicked and buried Maria as well as he was able. The jury deliberated for just 35 minutes before returning a verdict of guilty. Corder nearly wilted to the floor as the judge read his sentence. Quote, "My advice to you is not to flatter yourself with the slightest hope of mercy on earth, that you be taken back to the prison from whence you came, and that you be taken from thence on Monday next to a place of execution, and that you be there hanged by the neck until you are dead, and that your body shall afterwards be dissected and anatomized, and may the Lord God Almighty in his infinite goodness have mercy on your soul."
Wow.
2 days later, on August 11th, 1828, a crowd of at least 7,000, but one source claimed there were 20,000 people, gathered around the gallows and watched a visibly weak Corder step onto the scaffold. Earlier that week, he had confessed to the prison chaplain, claiming that he and Maria had gotten into an argument, possibly about their dead baby, who had never received a proper Christian burial, and had accidentally shot her in the face during the scuffle. As Corder stared out to the crowd, the air fell still. He said, quivering, quote, "I am guilty. My sentence is just. I deserve my fate, and may God have mercy on me." A cap was then draped over his face, a rope was tied around his neck, and gravity did the rest. William Corder's corpse swung gently in the wind for an hour before taken down and placed in a nearby hall, where the county surgeon sliced into the chest and folded back the skin to display the muscles of his chest. Then the doors were opened to the public. Thousands of speculators marched single file to gawk at Corder's remains.
Wow.
The following day, the body became
entertainment in 1826 England.
right. The following day, the body became the centerpiece of an autopsy attended by doctors and medical students from across the country. Quarter's organs were removed and inspected, and his body stripped of its skin, which was tanned and wrapped around the cover of a book chronicling his misdeeds. Quarter's skeleton was reassembled, exhibited, and used as a teaching aid in the West Suffolk Hospital. The skeleton was put on display in the Hunterian Museum in the Royal College of Surgeons in England, where it hung beside that of Jonathan Wild. And in 2004, Quarter's bones were removed and cremated. In 1846, Punch magazine would cynically joke that, quote, murder is doubtless a very shocking offense. Nevertheless, as what is done is not to be undone, let us make our money out of it. Indeed, over the next century, the Red Barn murder continued to fascinate the public, becoming a profitable cottage industry for artists and entertainers who wrote songs, poems, plays, and cheap penny dreadfuls about the incident. One particular ballad published by printer James Catnach sold more than 1 million copies.
Holy crap.
After the trial, doubts were raised about both the story of Anne Martin's dream and the fate of Quarter and Maria Martin's child. Anne was only a year older than Maria, and it was suggested that she and Quarter had been having an affair, and the two had planned to murder the murderer to dispose of Maria, and so that it would continue without hindrance. Anne's dream had started only a few days after Quarter married Moore, and it was suggested that jealousy was the motive for revealing the body's resting place, and the dreams were a simple subterfuge. Further rumors circulated about the death of Quarter and Martin's child. Both claimed they had taken their dead child to be buried in Sudbury, but no records of this could be discovered, and no trace was found of the child's burial site. In his written confession, Quarter admitted that he and Martin had argued on the day of the murder over the possibility of the burial site being discovered. Polstead would become a macabre pilgrimage site where tourists, some 200,000, are said to have visited the town in 1828 alone, eventually stripped the Red Barn bare. The wood was reportedly sold as toothpicks. Even poor Maria Martin's Polstead resting place suffered from the grubby hands of souvenir hunters, who mercilessly chipped away at her gravestone until it was little more than a stump. Interest in the murder was so great that the little physical evidence of the grisly happening remains. The book bound in Quarter's skin, however, is stored at the Moyes Hall Museum in Berry Street, Emmons, Suffolk. And the Cock Inn, where Polstead's coroner carried out his inquest to identify the skeleton of Maria Martin, is still in operation. If you visit and grab a pint, you may just hear people singing an eerie ballad that is now canon. Come all you bold, young, thoughtless men, a warning take by me, and think of my unhappy fate to be hanged upon the tree. My name is William Quarter, to you I do declare, I courted Maria Martin, most beautiful and fair. I promised I would marry her upon a certain day. Instead of that, I was resolved to take her life away. I went into her father's house the 18th of May, saying, my dear Maria, we will fix the wedding day. If you will meet me at the Red Barn, as sure as I have life, I will take you to Ipswich town and there make you my wife. I then went home and fetched my gun, my pickaxe, and my spade. I went to the Red Barn, and there I dug her grave.
Wow.
The fascination into this murder has continued well into the 20th century with 5 film versions, including the 1935 Maria Martin or the Red Barn Murder starring Todd Slaughter, and the 1980 BBC drama Maria Martin with Pippa Gard in the title role. The story has been dramatized for radio a number of times, including 2 radio dramas by Slaughter, one broadcast on BBC regional program in 1934, and one broadcast on the BBC Home Service in 1939. A fictionalized account of the murder produced in 1953 for the CBS radio series Crime Classics, entitled The Killing Story of William Quarter and the Farmer's Daughter, and Hanging Fire, a BBC Monday play broadcast in 1990, telling the story of the events leading up to the murder seen through the eyes of Martin's sister Anne. Christopher Bond wrote The Mystery of Maria Martin and the Murder in the Red Barn in 1991, a melodramatic stage version with some political and folktale elements. And the folk singer Shirley Collins and the Albion Band recorded a song in 1971 entitled The Murder of Maria Martin on their album No Roses. Part of the song is performed by Florence Pugh in the 2018 television dramatization of John le Carre's The Little Drummer Girl. And that is the story of the Red Barn murder.
Well, that was fascinating.
I thought so.
Yeah, that was really interesting.
Cool.
I've never heard of this. Apparently, it's famous.
Yes, very much so. Very much so. Lots been written about it. Awesome. Well, thanks for taking that journey with me. I appreciate another week of nerdery murdery.
Thank you, sir.
As always, you can find the hub for everything about us on nerderymurdery.com. You can find links, pictures, more information about the show, including videos that Zig sees fit to publish.
Yes, well, we're now publishing all of our unedited videos every week when we release an episode, as well as adding them to the episodes uh, playlist, so you can kind of catch it all, see what we're talking about, and see the soup, how the soup
Awesome.
is made.
Also, when this releases, I meant to mention this earlier, but also by the time this releases, we will have done another crossover with Two Geeks and a Microphone. So if you haven't listened to that, please do go back and listen. The first half is on their show. The second half will be on our show, as we've done before. So give that a listen.
Fun, fun, fun.
You can also find a link to our merchandise on our website, where if you wish to show off your nerdy or murdery fandom, please do consider that. And if you wish to donate to the show to help us with the costs to keep it going, you can find the link to our Patreon, where we do we have our patrons that do help us with the show. So please and thank you.
Please and thank you.
So with that,
I have been Zig with your nerdery.
and I'm Jeffrey with your murdery.
Cue the music.